So do I have to present what it is that we're making, or?
Yes, present to it.
So we're making tortillas. And I take that, and I put in, to make 8 tortillas, I put in 2 cups of flour and 1 cup of water, and the ratio is always half and half. And you can use whatever kind of flour you want. I like to do about half of it with regular white flour. It's just white 00 flour. And then I do another half of it with whole wheat flour. And the white flour makes it more elastic and easier to work with and easier to roll out. But it kind of has no flavor. And the whole wheat is also wholesome, and I think it tastes better. So put 2 cups of flour in a bowl, salt, about that much. I suppose it's about a teaspoon. And then if you put in some oil, it will keep it so that if you have any left over, they won't get dry as fast. But it's not essential, so about that much. The thing about flour is that different flour absorbs water to different amounts. So there's not really a precise amount of water that you have to add. It's going to be about 1 cup. So I'll put in 1/2 of it and stir it up. And the key here is that you want to get just the right amount of water so that it pulls away, just like any dough, that it pulls away from the bowl without being too sticky. And then that way, when you work in extra flour, you don't have to knead it, but when you work it together, it's not a big mess, and it'll be easier to roll out if it's fairly dry. So half of the flour was already, or half of the water was already in it, and this other half I'll do in bits of half and half. So you keep stirring it until you know that all of the wet parts of the flour have had as much contact with the flour as possible. So you see this part is all sticking together, but there's still quite a bit of flour on the bottom that has no liquid on it. So I sort of put it directly on those drier flour. Now you come together, right? It's all pulling away, none of the flour sticking to the side of the bowl. So this is just enough water. And that's the same way I would make any dough for any bread, but I wouldn't want any more water in this is going to make it too sticky, and you're going to have to add in more when you work it. And if it didn't have this much in it, then it would be too dry. And this is how much water is left over, so we don't need that. So you tip it out, and this doesn't have to be kneaded. You just want to bring it together into a dough and make it smooth. And this is the other sign that it was the right amount of water, is that I don't need to add a bunch of flour without my hand sticking to it. Okay, so that's it. So I take a bit of white flour, wrap it in plastic, and let it rest. You need a good bit of flour on it, otherwise it's going to stick to the plastic. So wrap it up. You don't need to refrigerate it or anything, you just let it sit there. If you can, a half an hour is great. If you don't have half an hour, in a pinch, I've done it just 5 minutes later or directly after, that was fine too. Okay, so then we'll let it sit, and we'll make the guacamole and the other stuff and cut everything, and then we'll shape them and put them in the tortillas. Okay, time to make the tortillas. So we're going to turn on the heat. It's pretty high. You either need a non-stick pan or a cast iron skillet. And the trick here is that it has to be really hot, but if it starts to get too hot, like it tends to do in this one, it's going to burn it. So you have to probably keep regulating it as you go. So let me grab so like I said, this is going to make 8, so I'm going to cut this in half once, and then cut these in half, and then each one of these in half. Alright, so here's our meat. And then having enough flour here so that it's not going to stick, I roll it into a ball, smash it down like this with my hands, pushing some flour into it, and then I use a little rolling pin like this, and I just roll a bit, kind kind of putting most of the pressure on the center and turning it a bit so that it stays round. And then once the center seems to get thin enough, I put most of the pressure on the edges to drag it out like this so that it's pretty much uniform. And it doesn't matter if they're ugly and square and all that stuff because they taste just the same. Okay. So here's the first one, and I try and time it with this rhythm so that while one is cooking, I'm making the second one. So you do is you put it in the pan, and you're going to kind of count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and you're going to do it to about 10, but I usually time it so it's about when I've got this next one down here, look down here, about once when I've got this one ready for the rolling is when this is ready to be flipped the first time. And it's really important that you do it exactly like this. So it's about 10 seconds, you flip it. Then it's going to sit like that depending on how hot it is for about 30 or 40 seconds, and it's pretty much the time that it takes me to roll out the next one. And if these stick because they're too if they're too wet and sticky and they stick to your surface and stuff like that, just roll it back up and start all over. So as it cooks, you're going to check the bottom and you want it to start bubbling. And I usually do, in fact, you can start to see it on the top, like there's a bubble and there's a bubble. And you want to leave it pretty undisturbed until the bottom starts to get just a little bit brown. This isn't quite hot. So what's going to change is that as we start making them, when we get to about the 5th one, these are going to start getting brown way too fast. And it's going to be a trick to try and keep the pan just at the right temperature. Okay. So you flip it. Like once it's got a couple of these brown spots, it's okay to flip. Now once you flip it, it's going to start to fill up with air, and you want to use your spatula and push down a little bit so that the air, see how it's puffing up? And you want to kind of guide it through to the edges. Okay, and then once the bottom starts to get brown like that, it's done. So pop it on a plate and then do the next one.
There's a tortilla.
Okay, so we're on our last one. While that one's cooking, we'll clean up because we don't want it to be that much of another pain to make these. And these are the ones that have just been made that are still hot. It works really well. After you put the last one on here and you flip them over, the ones on the bottom have been softer because they've almost steamed through from sitting there. So these ones starting from the bottom now taste more like a warm, fresh flour. And then do we want to show our other yummy stuff?
Oh no,